Okay, you're live on YouTube.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is the Recreation Advisory Committee meeting, December 17th, 2020. I'll do a roll call. Tracy Murphy here. Sharon.
Here.
Ann Sigsby.
Here.
Evan Lagasse.
Here.
Carol Coonahan. Joan Francolini.
Here.
And then Meph Runyon.
Here.
Okay, and Alan Harrison.
Here.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Nice that everyone still has power, and we dodged another. The past few storms, I've just been waiting for the power to go out, so it's nice to see it. It's especially nice to see everyone. The first thing I'd like to do is approve the minutes from 11/19 that Ann sent out a few weeks ago. Any corrections? Okay, I'll look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Okay, in a second.
Second the motion.
Okay, all in favor, Sharon?
Aye.
Ann?
Aye.
Evan?
Aye.
Joan?
Aye.
And Tracy Murphy, aye. Okay, Recreation Director's report. Alan, the floor is yours.
All right. Not much. The EEA has approved or has submitted all of the winter guidelines for sports. So basketball, if we have it, isn't that bad. It can be done. Waiting on the gym approval from the superintendent of schools if we get it. It won't be, if we do basketball, it won't be intertwined with the other towns. It'll be like we did soccer. It'll just be town amongst us. And if we do, and if we don't have basketball, then we've got a ton of other things planned. We've got ice skating at the rink. We've got our cross-country road race. We've got working on curling, day of curling, at least a teaching of curling. We've got some Zoom arts and crafts that we'll do. So we will have, we have a skate park day, 2 of them, out a half an hour on a day for kids to get some instruction. So we have some things planned regardless of whether we have basketball or not for the winter. But again, a lot of this is COVID related discussions with the health agent as to a yay or nay agreement on them as to whether we feel we should move ahead with these activities. That's about it.
Any questions for Alan about winter sports? Okay. We had talked at the last meeting about a safety policy for the recreation department, and then sent around to Alan and Morgan and to me a website called Safe Kids Thrive that has model safety policies, and also walks people through the steps that you would take to craft your own policy. So, and it's a great website just in terms of anticipating things that could come up and sort of really getting a good, complete policy. Alan, do you want to just update the board on your next steps?
Sure. So what I did is I met with we don't meet in person anymore. with the town administrator's office to discuss where we are in the rec department and having a policy, the town having a policy, what we do currently to go about hiring staff and checking them for any backgrounds, queries and sorries, and any policies that are currently in place, either in the handbook for employees or the parent handbook. So the town administrator's office had suggested this to me, that one, I make some calls to the two schools in town to see what policies they may have, and to just check with some of the local rec departments to see what they do, to see if they have anything that may differ from what we currently have. And we are in the process. I don't believe it's official yet. We have been in the process of interviewing for a beach director. And when that person is hired, then I'd probably kind of sit down and work with that person to come up with something that's workable for beach staff and rec staff. So what we decided was that through the rec advisory committee, as that they are advisory and would not be able to set a policy, that the group that was selected to work on the subcommittee put together any thoughts, things they have and would like to have them included in a either updated policy here, and get them to me, and I would include that through some discussion with the group, with some discussion with the beach director and with Tom Daly, to submit something, if desired, to the town administrator's office.
Okay, thank you. Could I just ask, I know when we emailed that you didn't have a date, a finish by date. I imagine that's partly because of the role of the as yet unhired beach director. Or, so at what point would you just move on and do something for rec department so that we can have something in place for spring and summer?
Well, I can't answer that. I mean, I know that it would be nice if the rec advisory committee had some suggestions, if they meet as their subcommittee and get any recommendations to me, preferably I would say by the February meeting. And from there, my discussions with the beach director and Tom Daly, and put something together. I certainly would need something, because I like to do my handbooks and things sometime around April. So sometimes around the spring would be a nice time to, if we're going to make if any changes are coming, that they come around the springtime, and they would come from the town administrator.
Anne and then Joan.
What I would propose, because I think it makes sense for our advisory capacity, for you, Alan, to consult with those that you said you would look at their models. And our next meeting, February, before our meeting, you present your draft of your written policy for us to then have our input, so that you would structure the policy according to how you take the input that you're seeking and write it up for us. In fact, I would, after a little discussion here, make a motion that the committee be prepared to review your written policy next meeting for us to provide our advisory role at that time.
It was presented to me the opposite of that by the town administrator's office. And that was seek out information from other towns, from other rec departments, seek out the schools, work with the new beach director, ask the Recreation Advisory Committee to review what they want to do and submit them to me, and me put it all together as a policy if there would be any changes to the current policy. I have no problem asking your group to meet and put together some thoughts. But I'm not going against what the town administrator has advised, which is to seek your committee's input as to what you would like to see in a policy, submit it to me, and I would put it together. I don't mean no problem after that discussing it with you group, but the report would be, the suggestion was that the guidance was the Rec Advisory Committee meets, puts together as a group, whether a subcommittee or whatever they decide to do, submit recommendations to me that I would include in my policy recommendations, if they are to be any, to the town administrator's office.
Can I follow up?
Yes, and then Joan, I see you.
Sure, thanks. And I agree, Ellen, we can do both, that our subgroup can present those ideas to you. And then the second part, as the advisory committee, ask you to write up all that you've solicited so that we can, as a group, we already have our subgroup. So as a group in February, we can then review the draft and see if there's other input in our role as an advisory committee. So in a sense, doing both.
Okay, I would not be in a position to have a draft to submit to anybody in February. The goal was have the advisory committee submit their recommendations to me by February.
Let me get to Joan and then we'll bounce back.
So I have a question, and Matt, maybe you could help. I think this goes beyond the rec committee, because I think of other places in the town that also have adults with kids. The library has a program, there's an after-school program, there's community events, and I'm wondering whether or not rec is just part of that, and is this a bigger topic? And I don't think Alan, he should be liable for all of this. I mean, there's a lot of people that would come together, and someone that writes policy is probably different than Alan, who's just representing rec. And I'm wondering if it is something that we want to take up to John Kelly on a bigger topic and, make it a focus for the town so it's consistent across any group. And of course, Alan would have a lot of input, and the beach guy would have a lot of input, but the library and aftercare and everyone would follow the same procedures and have input at one time. So that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, and theoretically, the senior group would have possibly the same need for policies. What I'll do is we don't have a real meeting. I don't think until January again. So, but I'll bring this up. I think that I was going to jump in and say to Alan that I just thought that whatever the outcome of this work was, that it should be part of the quarterly report that we get from the DPW, and the rec is a piece of that. So what you're suggesting is more, and I think it makes sense. So I'll just try to get clarity from John Kelly about and from the rest of the select board about how this should proceed.
Carol?
Related question to Joan and Meth's point would be, if it is a larger issue, which I would agree it probably is, at what point does the town council get his input? Because I think the whole point of it is to avoid liability and to avoid one horrible lawsuit at some point. So at some point he's got to be involved, and I don't know when that would be.
Me neither.
Anne?
Actually, I agree. Joan, your point is really well taken. And I think I might summarize my thoughts from rec. And I was the one who initiated this conversation, and not what the policy should be. I agree. It's not our role to set the policy, but I feel strongly that we should have clarity and it should be written. And as Joan said, that's a very good insight. The town is obliged to facilitate this so that it is clear, it's written, and it's part of every hire and interaction with staff and volunteers and parents and families and so forth.
Good, thank you. So we can check back in next month if Meth has had a chance. Meth?
I guess as people have been talking, and this is a question for Alan, programs that are not town programs but happen on town property, and I'm thinking of Oceana, for instance, as an example. Would the expectation be that they would also craft a policy that was acceptable to the town?
I would think we should. I would think that whatever is, and to be honest with you, I mean, Meth, with just two things that I would say on that is, one, if somebody does come to the town, to use like Oceana as an example, they don't come to rec for the permit for the fields. That's not rec's thing to do. So there may be, I think the first thing to do would be to find out maybe there's already something in place. And in terms of the other issue, in terms of hiring and a town-wide policy, I don't know how town-wide it is department by department, because I don't know what goes on in Council on Aging. I don't know what goes on in the library with its staffing, but I know that there are certain town-wide requirements like SORIs and CORIs and harassments. I'm reading it partly over my harassment policies, and those things, a lot of this has already been established by the town. It doesn't mean that the town can't adopt different standards or additional standards or town-wide, but there are some that are already established. So I think number one would be looking at those and going from that, because I know there are some policies in place. But as far as the other one, the groups that might rent our town, I think it'd be a great idea to have that. It may be something that's in place. I don't do those permits.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on then to a CPC update from Joan.
Sure. So this is easy. Everything was submitted. It's currently in review with legal. I am going to be the liaison with all the projects except for Carol's project, because that's going to go to MEF. Right, MEF? Right. Because MEF is doing, yeah, conservation. So MEF is with conservation. So that just was an easy trial there. So right now it's through legal. And then there will be meetings scheduled between January and the end of March or so. I think we're still working on that timeline, where then we come forward as rec and present the concepts and go through them. And at that time, I think it'll still be by Zoom because it's going to be soon. But it would be good to get back with Tom Daly to maybe see if he can come to the presentation, or Ron, or whoever from the town is supporting the rec concepts, or Nate if it's kayaks. So once we get the schedules up, we'll be able to email and say, you know, when can everyone be there, and schedule these. So that's the next CPC meeting, is deciding when those are happening. I did get a question from someone on the CPC team about the quotes we received for the engineering studies. And there was only one, and I did say that we got it from Tom, but we need to find out from Tom, do we always just get one, or does the town get 3? But since it came from Tom, he can help answer that for us. But that was really the only question. Hi, Meth.
And I would say, if I were you, I would put that whole category into Tom's hands. And if you
Right.
could get him to the meeting, that would be better, because
Right.
he's, if anybody questions those numbers, he's the one that should speak to it.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So we want to schedule when he could be there,
Right.
since he's the one that gave us. And then we would also have Stephen O'Grady from OTC there for any of the projects that we're co-sponsoring with him. So it's just, I think it takes a decent amount of coordination right now with Zoom. Because you can only do a certain amount of these at certain times. So, but that's really the next steps. And I think it's looking good.
Joan, if I may, from being in the building all the time and listening to Ron Collins and Tom Daly talk and work, I think what they do in the situation that they did is they get one quote to begin the process. And then once they get that quote and the process goes into place, if it was to go out to bid, it would go out to bid with various bidders. That it doesn't guarantee that that company that gave that quote gets the work. It's just a starting point in terms of somebody gave them a quote and they have something to work with in terms of when the bids come. If they're lower than that, they may go with the lower bid. If they're higher than that, then they would go with that bid. But I think when they finally come out to do the work, there's 3 bidders at least.
Oh, great. Thanks, Alan. That was helpful.
My understanding is from Tom that before the construction, certainly, the bids would go out in January of 2022, I think, you know, if the engineering study passes and is completed. So I know the next stage of the process has more bids. Anne, did you have something?
I guess it's a question for Meth. Will these projects through the CPA funding be tied to the bidding process? So for instance, the kayak racks, Dick Hilmer has a lot of experience building them, all for Brewster, with the Brewster guy. And will we be able to just pay individuals because they're going to partly volunteer and partly get materials?
Okay, so the actual payment process, the invoice process is pretty, I'm not going to say cumbersome, but it's quite involved, and because it goes through the finance department at the town. So they have documentation requirements. So, and if you're dealing with people like that, they need to, for instance, usually probably have already given the town a W-9, which is a tax document, and then they submit an invoice, and that invoice is signed off on by 2 people from the CPC, and then it's submitted into the finance hopper. and they pay bills once a week on Thursdays. And so you got to get this in, I think, by noon on Wednesday to get paid that Thursday. So you get into that. The CPC doesn't pay these things. The CPC uses the town finance department as the payer. So I thought you were going with what if you turn out to be incorrect with your estimates, and that's not a big deal, because if you've overestimated the cost and you don't need the money, then when the project's over, you just turn it back into the CPC. And if you don't have enough money, then you're back into reapplying and in the schedule, and it has to be approved by town meeting.
And to that point, the last meeting we had, it was a little confusing on the policy for payment. And they're going to work on just a one-pager we can hand out to everyone so that it's clear of what you do and what needs to be figured out. There was some confusion. Some groups were paying it by themselves, putting on their credit card and then getting repaid. So they're going to come up with a one-pager. The last meeting we were at, Matt, I think that was the. Yeah. So we'll have something by the next meeting to go over what would have to be done once it's all approved. It should be very clear. That's it. That's all I have.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, 5-year plan. We've talked about this, touched on this here and there, I think, since the committee was started. But we'd like to dig in a little more formally. So Anne did some research for us, and the next cross plan, which is what our 5-year plan would be a part of, is due in February of 2024. So that gives us some flexibility to really approach this the way that we think best suits our needs and purposes. We're not dealing with a upcoming deadline. Anne, do you want to update us on what you found out and some different sort of our options for how we go about this?
Sure. It depends a little bit on what we want to do, given that the cross plan is off in the future. And we've talked about our 5-year plan also as something that guides our year-to-year work and our month-to-month decisions, so that the 5-year plan really is a tool for us, at least the way we've talked about it. So if that's the case, we probably don't want to wait till the fall of 2023 to get, for instance, CPA funding to do a cross plan. We probably want to work as a group towards a 5-year plan because it's important to us. I'm not sure, we haven't made that specific decision, but so those are kind of two choices. One is not even addressing it now until we're closer to the deadline, and then get some financial help of some sort to put together a cross plan, or look at a 5-year plan now and in the near future, because we see it as a way to guide what we're doing and have a direction. If we do that, then there are strategies, and some of you may have been involved in strategic planning. I talked a little bit with John Ostman, who I got to know through the Orleans Pond Coalition. His work in life is to help people with business plans and strategic plans. And he took that nonprofit through a superb exercise, which if you've, again, been involved in such a thing, takes a group through defining their vision of what it is they are all about and where they want to be in X period of time, which is then part of a mission statement, and then ends up with goals. In a way, it's a values clarification exercise and shouldn't be done just to do it and feel good, but that process, and I think Carol is probably pretty familiar with this too, that process would then kick out for you what your goals are, objectives, and then action plans. And so the reason to do it is actually to know then what it is you want to do and what kind of timeline you had for it. If that's the kind of thing we as a group want to get into, it's a big, important project because we don't want to use our time to just feel good, but generate something that's a useful tool for us. John offered to help some. I don't think he's going to be available to do the whole shindig for us, but I can, if there's interest in 2021 of biting into this and getting a sense of how we go about it. And then perhaps using that to maybe get funding and full professional help by applying next fall. That might be a course for us to take. There's a lot of possibilities. I will tell you that between just us and the wider world that might see this recording, the very superb exercise in the nonprofit that I mentioned did not lead to the action plans. The action plans were generated, but then the process was not carried forward by the leadership. So I for one would say if we get into this, which is a lot of work, we also need to be committed to sticking with it and carrying out what we all agree upon.
Thoughts or questions or comments for Anne? Yeah, I'm inclined to support the idea of having, working with John Osman now and then applying for funding to really do a bigger, to finish the process. Snow day. Processing. I think that the survey, which we did a year ago at this time, was so helpful in guiding us through really the rest of the year, getting us to this point. And we won't have that going into the next year. And I think that this is that next step up. We've done that sort of initial surveying of the town and being responsive to those needs, and now thinking more strategically. I think about things like the 139 Main Street site and the possibility of some collaboration in the process, about Governor Prince. The more organized we can be about where we want to go, the better we can, approach those properties and, find partners. So I think this is a really important next step that will require digging in, but I think that we're at a place now where we're ready to dig in. Joan?
Yeah, I would like to just understand, as an advisory committee, what our role is in putting this plan together. What's the role in the town for financing any of the ideas that we have? And what's the role of the DPW? Because I guess that's part of or the town administrator. So before we start anything, I just need a lot more grounding on how all these things come together. And I think we should do it, but I'm not there yet that we should start it because I don't understand what base we're starting from.
Matt?
And I just want to point out that that report, the cross plan, is George Meservy's.
Okay.
He's the place I would start to get that grounding. If you want, whatever questions you have.
Well, because you read the old one and there's ideas in there and they haven't gone forward. And a lot of it could have been funding. A lot of it could have been things have changed. And I mean, I've worked on 5-year plans and after the first quarter of the next year, they're all thrown in the garbage because the market changes, or competition comes in and finances change. So I just want to make sure that we're spending time on something that's actionable, not a pie in the sky wish list. And, I come from a corporate background that was very quarterly based, and I always felt like 5-year plans went out the window really after the first quarter usually. So I just want to make sure that we are putting in work that's going to be fruitful. To your point, just to do it and not have something come forward from it would really be just not worth anyone's time or effort.
Well, if I can say, you asked some important questions. For whom are we creating a 5-year plan? Are we creating it for this committee? Are we creating it for Orleans or somewhere in between? And maybe to be grounded, besides talking with George, might be getting a sense of if we as a committee want to be leaders, what are our options above and beyond what we are now? Perhaps our 5-year plan is to have more say. And if that's the case, talking with people about how towns work and how committees work and how we can make more of a difference.
Is there such thing, I'm wondering, having not coming from the strategic, 5-year plan world, not having experience in that, is there a version that's more likely to lead to action? Like, is 5 years too long and we could get some help crafting a 2 or 3 year plan that feels a little more relevant? Does that make any? I hear Joan's concern about putting a lot of effort into something and then having it.
Well, I would think we would have, you'd have your goals and objectives, you have your mission, and there's so much online that we could take from. I mean, I spent some time Googling mission statements for rec departments. There's some great ones out there. There's some great strategic plans out there. I mean, borrowing saves you a lot of money. So, you can read these, you can borrow from them, but, I would say we need to do a look. I mean, if it was me, I would do some analytics and do a look back. What has happened for the last 2 years? What were the programs? What were the numbers? What were the results? Did we succeed? We should set up some metrics for this year coming up and measure ourselves against those metrics and set metrics for 2 years, 5 years. I mean, I might be overthinking it, but that's how I would lay it out. And then when you do your 5-year plan, we should have some goals set for, the next few years that could be obtained, I would say, and stretch goals if you want. But that's what I would do. But I do think we need to look back, and we need to look back at, what has happened in rec over the last few years, and those lessons learned, and what's our strengths and where's our weaknesses. And I mean, I think it would be a great exercise to do that before we do a 5-year plan. I mean, that interests me.
Mm-hmm.
And Metrics and research totally interests me because it gives you a framework of what you're going to go do and have some proof. And then you can ask for money for, more staffing for Allen if there's more kids participating, or, merging with other town committees because they've already got something going on. So that would be my sort of take on how I would look at it, but I don't know.
And that is what is it called? I don't remember the terminology, SWOT, doing a
Yeah,
SWOT.
SWOT analysis, yeah.
Strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and whatever T stands for.
Threats.
Threats, right. Yeah.
Yep, Carol?
Yeah, I mean, 5 years is traditional, but for several of the reasons that were already said, they often don't make it or don't get implemented. And the schools, as you know, Tracy, do 3 years. And there's a little less chance there'll be drastic changes in the market or the funding, but there's still, I mean, we have COVID, right? The thing in my experience that I would add is another reason they don't the action plans don't get implemented after the first year is the turnover in people. Because the beauty of one of these plans isn't just what your output, it's the process. And when you've gone through one of these together, that group of people really has buy-in. You own those ideas and you believe in what you've created. And then if you're part of an organization that just changes, people because there's term limits, which is a good thing, or whether they're volunteers and they come and go or whatever, that's another reason that the new group doesn't feel as bought in. And so they often go do another one because then they'll feel bought in. So that's another killer of action plans.
Okay, so I guess what I'm thinking then is lean towards something simpler in the near future and see where it gets us. Yes, does that not, Anne?
Well, I've discovered that this group right now and the last year or two has developed a culture of commitment, leadership, hard work. And I just think that if we can crystallize our vision and have some steps, whether you call it a strategic plan or an X number of year plan, that our group, which I truly am impressed with, will leave a legacy so that recreation is headed in a path that we have a role in setting. And this may be a tool to do it in some form.
Okay, Evan?
Yeah, I'm certainly in favor of a plan. I think, you don't, before you go on a road trip, you got to plan where you're going, right? So we need to begin with the end in mind. I think we could probably debate until we're blue in the face how long the term should be for the plan. And I don't think we necessarily need to solve that during this meeting, but certainly would be very interested in Alan's input and what things he has planned for recreation, since he's working this program day in and day out, and I assume has a 1 year or a 3 year or a 5 year plan already. And I see our committee as a committee who can put together some really good ideas to add to that plan, but also take over as action officers to go after the funding and implement some ideas he already has. So I'd just like to ask Alan if there are some big ticket items kind of on your wish list for recreation already that you have on a 1 year, 3 year, or 5 year plan. Alan, over to you.
Well, I mean, I come from it from the sense of programming. I mean, and what I'm seeing and enjoying with the committee is your efforts to get space to get an outdoor basketball court, to help with the pickleball court. The things that I'm focusing on are more on the other side of it. Like, you get the facilities, I'll put the programs in the facilities. You get me another gym or a rec center, whether it's got a pool or doesn't have a pool. I mean, we'll fill it with programs. So the opportunities for programming is unbelievably wide open. And I say that only because, like, for example, there is a Cape-wide rec. We meet every so often as a group from the Nauset district and then from the Cape. And we're meeting from the Cape tomorrow, and we discuss ideas. I mean, something that Mashpee says we're doing, and this is how we're attacking Zoom, and this is how we're attacking COVID, and it's shared with everybody. And that's where I'm sort of focusing my time that I have, is building programs, making things for people, even looking at COVID right now and saying, well, what are we going to do if I don't have a gym to run basketball because the school made the decision that we can't use the gym? What are we going to do? So we connect with the rink and we get public skating sessions. We get a curling workshop. We have to use some outdoor facilities for short-term programming. So that's where I'm coming from, in that your efforts to get me the facilities is a help in me doing what I need to do and want to do and am trained to do, which is programming. And the sky's the limit with programming, with the facility, depending on what we've got for space. And as you know, we don't have a lot of space for recreation in town. Here's an example. Someone was discussing with me, and I haven't decided whether I would bring this to the town administrator yet, but we were talking about making the Little League field by the town hall, when baseball is over, which is usually by the end of June, is possibly making a temporary dog park there, because it's totally fenced in. It's totally fenced in. There's parking, with a few minor adjustments, maybe some benches and some other things. We could have let's try it and see if it works. See if people actually want to have a dog park before we actually come running to the town looking for money to build a dog park. I mean, this is what I'm doing. And this is where I believe we should be working together in terms of, and I've said this a million times, staffing. I mean, staffing. You want to know what I want? Staffing. Facilities, more space. And I think we're headed in the right direction with some outdoor space, with pickleball courts, and we can run pickleball tournaments. We can run pickleball sessions. We can just let people play pickleball. That's where we should be working together. And my focus is on building new and additional programs for residents.
Joan?
So I think there's a couple of things. I'm just stepping back. I think what Alan does is one part of recreation. And I think there's more to recreation than what Alan's focused on. And I would think the town, and I could be wrong, should have a recreation plan that includes what Alan does to running programs, what the senior center does with running programs, and the facilities and everything else that comes with it. I might be thinking too big, but where does that strategic plan fall? Because Alan's in charge of one part of recreation, and recreation is so much broader. And when Alan, you just said, like, talk about a dog park, I wouldn't have thought of that as part of recreation under what you're doing. I would have thought of that as they would go to whoever's in charge of open space or, something else like that. So that was an interesting find. But I'm thinking, once again, this is sort of a level above Alan to really look at recreation holistically. And Alan, of course, would be a big part of it, but there's also a whole other section of it. So I don't know, Meph, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, I keep thinking when you have discussions like this that, the Charter Review Committee is going on, and they're the ones that would be involved in deciding whether this should be a commission or an advisory committee. And for these bigger picture things, it sure sounds commission-like to me.
Meph, do you know what the timeline is on the charter committee?
It's going to be going on for a while. There is no deadline for it. They meet on the first and third Mondays each month, and literally, it could go on for a couple of years if they get bogged down and stuff. But these are the kind of things that they're going to be considering. And you should contact John Fuller if you're interested in it, and just let him know that they are dying to hear from people and get input from the town.
Okay, thank you. I think it's another reason to get organized about where we'd like to be in a few years. And if we can't get to that place as a committee, then that's, then we know what our next step is. Okay, I think I'd like to continue this discussion at the next meeting and dig into a mission statement then, but give everyone a little time to process between now and then. Okay. Governor Prince's study or feasibility study, Joan had reached out about a role for recreation. There was a forum last week, and Judy Barrett, who's doing the feasibility study, spoke and took comments, and has expressed interest in hearing from any and all citizens who want to make their voices heard. So I'd like to reach out, but I'm looking for input from the committee about exactly what we're asking, what role we'd like to see for recreation in the project. So thoughts or ideas? It's still, so my understanding, housing will be, is a big part of this project, and a lot of people would like to see this location used for housing. But I also think it's a big property, and there could be room for recreation to take up some portion of that property, to kind of coexist with housing. Joan?
Yeah, well, what I was thinking, it might not necessarily be a rec center, but if they're going to build housing, we should make a big plea that there's some outdoor recreation spaces built into it that the whole town could use, whether or not that's another basketball court or a ball field or something that Allen needs or something the senior center needs, but build it with the idea that there is a space. And even if it could be an indoor space that could be used, but so there could be people living there, but whatever structure or fields could be used by the entire community. And that's how I would see it going. And, whether a rec center would be built or not, that's a big ask, but to keep the whole thing open so that we always have conversation that includes opportunities for recreation, no matter what age, at this big space. That was my thought.
That's helpful. Other ideas? Or Anne?
encouraging people to think about multiple uses. I think the town is committed to housing, but it is a big space, and the idea of integrating recreation in a housing community is wonderful. Who wouldn't want to live near or amidst good recreation? And if it's feasible, then that's why a feasibility study is good. There, who knows, maybe that space could be where the regional Olympic pool goes, because A, the residents could use it, and B, all of Nauset could use it, and the town could use it. So there's, we have been having some very informal conversations with the Eastham group, who's interestingly thinking of the same thing for their tea time property, is how can they include recreation and housing on the same space? And how might they share amenities with, for instance, Orleans? And the other thing to consider when recreation services or facilities are included in the town is they have the potential for generating revenue. Be it a center where activities or weddings or conferences are held, or a pool where other people come to use it too.
Thank you. Okay, that's helpful. I'm happy to take the lead on contacting Judy unless someone else has an interest. Okay, then I will get back to you at the next meeting. Next item is 139 Main Street. We talked last time about generating some ideas for recreation at that site. Anne had talked about the Orleans Historical Society and possible collaboration. I didn't know if anyone had given it any thought and had any ideas that we want to take into consideration. So I think working with the Historical Society could be a really exciting collaboration. To plan some sort of recreation that fits into their vision for their site on that property. I think that would be an interesting next step. We talked about the Oak Ridge and Sandwich, and it is that Evan brought to our attention that did such a nice job with, I think, pickleball and skate park, of bringing together different age groups in town. It's hard to, the property that we're looking at is small, but I'm still really drawn to that idea of something that would be compelling for young and older. So I'm wondering if the Historical Society might have an interesting way to bring those groups together. And the recreation could be a matter of, a trail or a climbing structure for kids or something like that. I'd also wondered if it was big enough. We talked, I think, last spring about fitness stations, outdoor fitness stations. So I didn't know if it was an opportunity for that. And then I was going back to the survey and seeing biking was something that was so popular on the survey. I think Morgan last spring talked about some sort of kids bike loop. There are also pump tracks for mountain bike. So I think there are some interesting directions that we can go into. It's just a matter of what makes the most sense for that space. So that's where was my chain of thought. I'm wondering if we could talk to the Historical Society. And is that something that you think they're ready to start talking about?
Yes, I think they are interested in having somebody from our group come begin to talk with them, and then we can get it all together if the ideas come out of that.
Joan?
The one thing I would love, and maybe it's in the town, but it would be such a nice area to really just have something about the indigenous people that we hear in Orleans and make that a focus of a historic area. And I mean, there's so much outdoor stuff you could do and then programmings that could take place there, but it's such a miss right now, I think, in Orleans. And it could be such a benefit to having something there you can have events, you can have programs, you can have educational things, but maybe some symbols of it there. I mean, I think of when people find arrowheads at Sequel, how excited they are, and maybe there's some outdoor displays, but there's something to that I think would enhance what's going on with the Historic Society. And I don't know if it's recreational per se, but it's historic.
Carol?
Yeah, I'd be willing to work on that with Anne and be part of those initial discussions. Because I think even pocket parks, if you go in that direction, they are usually linked to what they're near. And so it's very possible the historical folks feel like Alan, and they would expand their programs if they thought they had more outdoor space. And all of a sudden, if we can help make that happen, then hey, it's a win for everybody. So.
Great.
That's great. Okay, and then Orleans Citizens Forum reached out last week. They would like to have a forum in January about the community center. Having seen the support at town meeting, even though we didn't get 3/4, that there was a lot of interest in the community center. And so the Citizens Forum is a really nice opportunity to keep the conversation going. I think I was concerned that the conversation sort of fades until we have another opportunity to bring a warrant article up again. This means that doesn't have to happen. And they had some interesting questions for us to think about. So I met today to discuss the forum. And right now the date is January 25th from 5:30 to 7. So there will be representation from this committee. I'll do it. I think Kyle, if he's in a place at that point where he's ready to get back into the community center, we'll have him represent as well. Kevin Galligan will also be there and can fill in some of the process and financial questions about how the town might tackle this. And then a woman named Carolyn Carey, who worked on the Harwich Community Center, will also be there. So the thinking, it was a really positive meeting, and the thinking is that this is an opportunity both to express this committee's commitment to the idea, but also seek input from citizens who could help us further clarify that vision. I noted that the survey showed interest in a community center, but one person might have checked off community center thinking arts and crafts classes, and another person checked it off thinking, getting that indoor racquetball court. We need to get a sense of what was behind that positive response. But I think that, it can only bring good things. the sense was that the Harwich Community Center has been so successful and is so lively. You know, I guess Girl Scout groups moving out at 6:30 because the Harwich band is coming in for their meeting and they have to get out by 8 to make room for the yoga class coming in. That would be a real selling point once people in Orleans had a sense of how vibrant this community center could be. There was also the thought that there are needs that we can anticipate the community center filling, but that once we have a community center, all these other ideas will, you know, come to us. That, you know, now that we see these two groups meeting in the rooms next to each other, can we do a collaboration and that sort of thing? So it's an exciting opportunity. We'll be doing outreach next month. And then I think that Kevin had said that also a hope would be that from this meeting and maybe future Orleans citizen forums on the subject, that we could get the interest and support that would help us frame a warrant article for the spring, that we can be a little more specific in this next warrant article from what we learn through this. So that was an exciting, we talked about phases, the possibility of doing one phase now and then an additional phase at some point that would incorporate more of a senior center element, given that the current senior center, you know, might not, but there was concern about water on Rock Harbor Road, right? You know, that might not be a sustainable building for the town. So lots of excitement and enthusiasm. And I think all to the good. And we can not recycle, but we can use our survey PowerPoint again. So that's good too. So any questions or concerns? So we'll have a chance to meet before then, but you should certainly be marking your calendars. It'll be a big night. Okay, so future agenda items. Joan.
So the police department's trying to get more engaged with the community, and I think the police department does a great job, but not just the head of the police, but the rest want to get engaged. And I was wondering whether or not we can have them come speak to us about what they think about some of the recreation opportunities for young families and kids, and what would be their sort of wish list or safety things, but a topic that gets them to know us and us to get to know them, and not just the chief of police. So I was just wondering if other people would be interested in that and getting their perspective, and if it was worth, you know, having them just come to the meeting to give us some, you know, bike accidents or things that we should be thinking about that maybe we're not thinking about, you know, kids walking or running through the parking lots, which I do see a lot. But so just wondering if you would be open to that, if you think it's a good idea.
So you would be looking for Scott McDonald and another
It
representative?
wouldn't be Scott, it'd probably be someone from his team. He's trying to get his team to be more well-known. Everyone knows Scott, but you don't know as many more people that are on his force. And so it'd be trying to get us to know some more people from the force. And I was just thinking, God, I would love to know what's happening with kids in town. Is there anything we should be thinking about or looking forward to? What he thinks, you know, how's the skate park doing? Is there anything we need to be thinking about adding anything there? Is it all good? But just getting their perspective, and as we're looking at a basketball court and other things, you know, what would they think we should be considering? So it's just a way for us to know more of his team and for them to know those of us on some committees.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Thank you. I'm happy to reach out if that works for you.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so our next meeting is January 21st. Any other agenda ideas, please bring them to me. And I'll look for a motion to adjourn. This is a first time we've been out this early in a long time, so.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, and a second? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And
Have a nice holiday.
We'll see you on the other side.
Thank you, Tracy.